All right. I promised at the beginning, and yes, there will probably be at least a full episode on this subject alone, maybe a couple, maybe a documentary even. But Rod Parsley, through the prayer cloth anointing, transferable, yada yada yada, um, is able or is credited with getting a convicted clergy abuser, sex abuser, and a registered sex offender out of prison early. And, we believe in mercy and for people to, anyway, but I'm just going to play this, Robin, and I need help with this because I need help with this. I'm going to ask you to react to it when it's all done. This is, I tried to make it a little shorter, but this is a CHN minister who's one of the leaders, and I'm just going to play it.
I was born, very thankfully, as a child of two pastors. My mom and dad were both in the ministry. But then at the age of 12, everything took a drastic turn. I found out that my father was involved with adulterous relationships with a few women inside the congregation. My mother, as anyone could imagine, was devastated. She was hurt, she was betrayed, and she was ready to put an end to the marriage. She wanted out of the marriage. When she found out what had happened, she never felt the hand of God release her from being married to my father. This friend came up and put into my hands 2 prayer cloths. And he said, "This prayer cloth is for you, Jonathan, and the second prayer cloth is for your father." He was very well aware of our situation. And he said, "I want you to take the second prayer cloth and I want you to put it in your father's hands the day he walks out of that prison as a free man." He then went on to explain to me that Pastor Rod Parsley was going to be having a service where he was going to be coming into agreement with everyone that had a prayer cloth. And he was going to be believing God that the problems we had in 2010 would not be permitted to cross over into 2011. 7 days later, I received a phone call. They gave me a link to a website. It was the governor's website. They said, "Go to the link right away." I typed in the link and went to it. And as the governor's website pulled up, I saw my father's name, Donald K. Miller. And underneath his name, I read the words, "Executive Clemency."
I called home, and his response to me was, "Dad, you're coming home."
The tragedy with a beautiful ending that only God could bring.
I believe it was a miracle that came through this prayer cloth right here.
Robin, do you have any reaction to that?
I have a lot of reaction to that. I mean, first and foremost, being an adulterer, which is terrible in its own right, does not send you to prison. Okay. So let's talk about why you were actually in prison. And these adulterous affairs, that's also not true, or you would not be a registered sex offender. So let's talk about what your dad was actually doing and what landed him in prison for several years.
17, as a matter of fact. Well, you're exactly right. And in the beginning of that video, it said he had several affairs. Robin, I can show the court documents. He was convicted of a count of rape and 8 or 9 counts of sexual battery. And these came about, as you go through the court records, they came about. That church got more and more cult-like, and they required, if you wanted to be a member, especially the ladies, you had to counsel with the pastor. And as a result of those counseling sessions, that's when he perpetrated the sexual abuse on. So what do you make of so that's what really happened. That is what really happened. And the thing is a tragic story with a beautiful ending. Do you, based on your experience, Robin, do you think has there been a beautiful ending for the victims of the rape and the sexual battery?
Absolutely not. For several reasons. A, they're presenting it as, yeah, they put sprinkled a little bit of truth in there, but it's not even the truth because he wouldn't have been convicted of battery and rape if he was simply having adulterous affairs. And again, that's not to say that that's not wrong in its own right, but it certainly doesn't send you to prison for that. And then to paint it as it was this miracle that you were let out and your mom stayed married to him because the Lord did not release her. But now these people are out still preaching and attending, some of these services at World Harvest and Lord knows where else, and presenting this fabricated story as a miracle. Let's tell the real truth about the what has happened here. And if he's truly repentant, that's great. I'm great, grateful for God and to him that that's the case, but they're not telling the truth about the situation.
So how do you think he actually got out of prison early after being convicted of rape and sexual battery? What do you think was the cause of that? Was that a miracle from
Who
Rod
knows?
Parsley's
I
prayer
mean,
cloth?
yeah, who knows? Who knows? I mean, it could be several things, but I don't, maybe Rod had some connections that helped him get out of prison early, but I don't believe that it was an anointed prayer cloth. No.
Well, this may be a cliffhanger, but since you said may have had some connections, and we're just wondering, Robin, are you familiar with the Elder Bender death? Are you familiar with that?
I am.
Okay. Can you quickly give because we're going to wrap up here in just a minute, but would you be able to just give the audience is going, I don't have no idea what they're talking about. Can you take a minute and just bring them up to
Yeah,
snuff what actually happened?
I can give you as much as I know. So Elder Bender was I actually worked with his wife, but he was why is your mouth dropped?
I didn't know that you knew his wife.
Yeah. So
Can,
Barb, I hope it's okay to say her name. She was still working at World Harvest when I worked there, and great lady. And I haven't heard anything but great things about Elder Bender. So Elder
right.
Bender obviously was an elder, but he taught some classes at Valor, and he would preach sometimes. And he had he had left the church several times because he wasn't in agreement with how things were being handled by the Parsleys. And so he would leave, but then something, would always bring him back. And after a service that he preached, he unfortunately, left on his motorcycle and was struck and killed right after leaving that service.
And wasn't that like right out there by the church, which is out in the
Oh,
middle,
yeah, it was right outside of the church. And I think, in fact, Rod Parsley was one of the first people on the scene of the accident.
Well, we will come back to this at some point, but I'm going to just go to the slideshow because here's the only thing. This is the only thing that's just everybody I've talked to about that said there's something really strange about that. The font is real small, but this is from the Columbus Dispatch. So if you don't mind, Robin, can you just tell? I think you're familiar with this article. Tell us what people can learn from this article, if you don't mind. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so I believe that the person that struck and killed Elder Bender was driving under the influence, and the accident happened, and then he was, tried for it, but only spent a couple of days in jail for vehicular homicide.
Well, yeah, since I read this last night and then put it in there, and we're going to just breeze through it. What seems really strange, ladies and gentlemen, is that this gentleman, and correct me if I'm wrong, Robin, he was definitely under the influence. This was vehicular homicide. At this point in the recording, we suffered a domestic interruption, at the Ohio Freedom Studios based on something that we had to go off and do. So I'm coming back here a little bit later to put the bow on this that I was attempting to do earlier. So I'll just say this. These are just questions, folks. But the tragic death and mysterious death of this beloved individual, Elder Bender, it just raises a lot of questions. Questions we don't have time to get into all of them right now, but why, when the prosecution had the perpetrator, the driver, a Mr. Vedrinsky, basically dead to rights for vehicular homicide and over the limit driving, why was the sentence essentially reduced to, he served 20 days in jail, folks. 20 days, a total of 20 days. Can you explain that? We've looked at the sentencing record of this judge, Chris Martin, who is now deceased. It makes no sense. And so these are just questions, but it also makes you wonder what was really going on when this professionally shot and slickly edited video that Jonathan Miller did about his father being miraculously released because of a prayer cloth and the convictions were rape and 8 or 9 counts of sexual battery. Do we just take that at face value, or is it possible that something else is at play? We're just asking questions. So, folks, thanks for tuning in. And until next time, God bless you. God bless your family. God bless the state of Ohio. And God bless the United States of America. See you next time.